Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the Council's webpage. The Council is a data controller under the General Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil a public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected through the process will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who also received invites to the meeting. Okay. So do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor McCord and Councillor Brennan substituting. Convener will now move to a roll call. The following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely. Councillor Curley.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Crowther.
Present in chamber.
Councillor McCabe.
Present remotely.
Councillor McCluskey.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Brennan.
Present remotely.
Councillor Maguire.
Present remotely.
Thomas Mackenzie.
In the chamber.
Councillor McVeigh.
In chamber.
Councillor Nelson.
In chamber.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present remotely. She's the chair.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Went remotely.
Somebody opened up the window. The button at the back. Did you get that one too?
That's right. We'll move on to the meeting, and the first paper is paper 2, performance management.
Thanks, Chair. So this report sets out the internal audit activities since the last meeting of the committee in February. There were 2 audit reports finalised, including climate change, utilities management and educational control self-assessment. In relation to climate change utilities management, the overall control environment opinion was satisfactory. There were 3 amber issues identified. Firstly, in relation to having adequate resources in place to progress the action plan for the net zero strategy. Secondly, there are no documented procedures and no independent check carried out in relation to the collation and reporting of emission results. And finally, the records retention policy has not been implemented for climate change utilities management records. There were 5 issues identified and an action plan is in place to address all issues by the 31st of May 2024. In relation to educational control self-assessments, the overall control environment opinion was satisfactory. The review focused on 2 particular areas, namely school funds administration and attendance management. 3 amber issues were identified. Firstly, in relation to a number of schools not having a school funds committee and minuted meetings. Secondly, the recording of fundraising events was not always recorded in the school calendar for some establishments. And finally, refresher training in relation to attendance management is required at some establishments. There were 4 issues identified and an action plan is in place to address all issues by the 31st of December 2023. Chair, as an update, the fieldwork for the 2022 to 23 audit plan is now complete and the final audit report is being drafted for the debt recovery review. In relation to the National Fraud Initiative matches, the relevant data sets have now been received and there's a separate report on today's agenda in relation to the 2022 to 23 exercise. In relation to internal audit actions, there were 2 actions due for completion by the 31st of March and both actions have missed the deadline set by management. These relate to high mileage claims, value for money exercise and also the update of the rent management policy for the homelessness service. Revised dates have been set for both actions and the current status report is attached to Appendix 2. Chair, officers from relevant services are in attendance at the committee today to answer any questions. Happy to take any queries. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah,
I've got two questions. I'll start with the education one, if I could go to big page 21. The establishment of school funds written constitution, and the establishment of school funds written constitution. Now the dates, the due dates for these, one is 31st of August, one is the 31st of December. There were, I think, probably only, if I remember, 7 establishments who didn't have the reporting in place. Why are we leaving it to August and to December in order to implement what is a very straightforward record of what's happening with school funds? That's my first question.
Right. And are you able to answer that one? Bruce, do you answer that?
Yes, I can comment on that one. So we would need to work with the school business manager.
We can't hear you very well. I don't know if you can.
Oh. Shall I try again?
Yeah, just maybe a bit louder.
Is that better?
A wee bit better, yeah.
Okay. I'll speak slowly and loudly, and if you're struggling to pick me up. So basically, we would need to work with the school business managers and also the head teachers to make sure that they have the appropriate manuals and also the constitutions. Also, a lot of the school fund constitutions would also need to be in consultation with the parent councils as well, looking at the different types of fundraising activities they do too. So I think all this is a reasonable timescale, given the fact we're also in with lots of times when the schools have productions and also school trips away.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to see it done a bit more quickly, but that's okay. I understand. My next question is on page 7 with regard to climate change activity. First question is, why are we leaving these actions to be taken until the 31st of May next year, when this net zero is supposed to be the most urgent thing we're doing? And secondly, in terms of our target, I noticed that within the last fortnight, the Scottish Government has changed its target, or acknowledged that its original target to hit net zero has changed, which I'm not really critical of, it's just the way it is. But do we not need to change this 72.5% reduction by 2031? So that's two questions. Why we're leaving all the actions till the 31st of May next year, including recruitment of 3 staff, and also, is the 72.5% reduction by 2031 pie in the sky?
Stuart Jefferson, are you able to answer that question?
You can be. There's a number of actions which are against the net zero target, and it all comes down to available resource. Can I just confirm to Councillor Wilson that in terms of the recruitment process, we are already partway through the recruitment process, and indeed we've appointed the team leader, and he's due to start on the 29th of May. The other 2 posts are about to go to recruitment, and once we have all these posts fulfilled, we will then be in a position to achieve the outcomes which are identified within the audit actions. With regards to the Council's desire to achieve net zero by 2045, that's something which we'll keep under review. Clearly, we have an action plan. That action plan has targets against it, and we'll report to committee, we're due to report to committee in June, the activity that we've had in respect of climate change, and we'll constantly keep that under review and bring reports back to committee as required, and if we have to amend targets, we will do so.
Good.
Okay. Councillor Cave, would you like to come in?
Yes, Thanks, Chair. I was going to ask about on page 8, the section at the top, collation and reporting of emissions results. Seems that obviously this is pretty laborious stuff in terms of extracting this information. I was going to ask whether we've had any discussions with the suppliers about whether they can provide us with any sort of reports directly, and or have we had any discussions with fellow councils to see if they've got a sort of better way of collecting this information?
Yeah, Stuart, can you answer that?
Yeah, through you, convener. We do engage with suppliers, Councillor McCabe. We also engage with other local authorities in terms of their returns. One of the key actions against this is the independent check in respect of the information which we provide. I agree with you wholeheartedly, it's a laborious process, but the advantage that we'll have with the appointment of the team leader is that the officer will collate the information and then the team leader will be able to verify it. So we'll then be able to have that check on the process, and therefore that action should be concluded.
Thanks. I mean, that's useful. I just think it would be helpful potentially if we could maybe see if there's an easier way of collecting that information in the first place.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McCluskey.
Right. Thanks, Chair. Just two questions. Firstly, on the school funds, does this include money held by PTAs, parent councils? So that's all contained within this. Right, that answers that question. Just the second question is just on the high mileage claims. Given that the due date is now the 30th of April, and I think date's this 25th, are we on track to deliver it by the 30th of April?
Through you, Chair, my understanding is there's a report going to CMT imminently regarding that. I think the report's being prepared. It's just getting a timescale for CMT for approval, but Stuart may be able to confirm that.
Sure.
Through you, convener, Ms. Priestman's correct.
Thank you.
So, Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, convener and provost. I've had quite a few of mine actually already answered. You'll be relieved to know, but I do have one in particular just around the attendance management policy or two that haven't been answered. So why have 5 out of 39 establishments not had initial training? And secondly, as a kind of follow-on question from that, in the next paragraph, it says that 7 out of 39 establishments do not report absence statistics to relevant senior management. Does that mean that some of the statistics that we read in other related committees actually don't have robust figures that can be relied upon? Just because obviously we didn't know that some places didn't have it, because I can see here that 7 out of 39 don't report at all.
Okay, Andy, can you?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'll probably bring Ruth in as well, but in terms of, there's another report on today's agenda, Councillor Maguire, in relation to the internal audit plan for 23-24, and you can see we're going to look at attendance management across the council in totality, and it's to make sure exactly that issue in terms of feeding through to the corporate process. However, all attendances are recorded on HR21, which is the council's personnel system, and therefore the corporate statistics will pull that information through the corporate system that the audit's on for this year, just to give Audit Committee that further assurance that that process is robust. Hopefully that
Okay,
answers
that's
the
great.
query.
That answers it fully, yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you, convener. I'm looking at page 24, analysis of missed deadlines. A few items that have missed the deadline. What was the reason they missed the deadline?
Through you, Chair, so the two that missed for the 31st of March, first was in relation to the employee expenses, the high mileage value for money exercise. So the exercise has been undertaken. There has to be a report goes up to the management team with recommendations for how they take that forward. The second issue is a long-standing issue for the homelessness service, and it's the update of the rent management policy. A significant amount of work has been done, and they're confident that the whole process will be properly and fully embedded by the 31st of July. And the Chief Officer, Kate Rocks, is aware of the commitment in terms of testing that process to make sure we've got a couple of months worth of embedding the policy before we get it signed off with them. Hopefully that gives you some assurance, Councillor McVeigh.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, Andy, but I'm keen to understand if the deadline given, if it's missed for whatever reason. The committee made aware of that because you're looking at first on homeless, it's that 1, 2, 3 deadline have been missed. And I would ask that if a deadline is missed, then it's noted in the paper, so we understand if there's been an issue. I mean, deadlines, maybe the deadline was maybe not set correctly in the first place, maybe there have been issues affecting the work being done to meet the deadline, and I would like to ask if future reports itemise that and tell us why the deadline's been missed. That's okay?
Through you, Chair, I don't know if Section 4 gives you that information that you're looking for.
No,
it gives you the management comments.
No, I'm on Section 4, it gives you the commentary, it doesn't tell you why the deadline's missed.
Okay, I'll ask officers to make that clearer for future reports.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yes, any other questions on it? John?
Thank you, Convener. One of the biggest problems that councils undoubtedly will have is to do with cyber security. And while I welcome that there's training for staff, as elected members, we also receive a lot of emails. And while the antivirus will pick up some of these emails, it is possible that some could get through. Is there any guidance that would be given to elected members to ensure that we do not unwittingly download some virus?
Right.
To yourself, Convener, we're happy to give guidance to members in relation to that. There is no doctrine in relation to cyber security, and I'm happy to share some of the slides.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, so move on to item number 3, which is external audit and action plans, current actions.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the normal external audit action plan follow-up reports in relation to the annual audit. There was one action due to completion by the 31st of March, which has been reported as completed by management. There are 3 current actions being progressed by officers. These are set out at Appendix 1. Officers from finance and other services are in attendance today if there are any questions from committee. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I'd like to ask about the local development plan. Our local development plan has not been the greatest for the past 5 years. It really has not been helpful, and that has caused us problems. I notice here that the due date is the 30th of April 26. Is there any way we can bring that date forward to give us a proper operational local development plan before that time? Thank you.
Okay, that's Stuart. Can you answer?
Convener, through you, as members are aware, this has been reported for some time, and there were mitigating circumstances as to why we don't have an adopted local development plan. And to answer Councillor Wilson's second question, no, there isn't. We've got to follow due process, which is set out by Scottish Government. We've got to go through a consultation process, or a number of consultation processes, and that's the quickest that officers believe that we can bring a local development plan before members.
Thank you. Could I have a supplementary, please?
Yes.
Tell me, Mr. Jameson, where are you with recruiting a local development plan manager?
Through you, Convener, I have a number of applications on my desk for a planning and building standards manager. That will then follow in the recruitment process, and hopefully we can appoint someone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Councillor Cave?
Thanks, Chair. Just to ask in terms of the the first two actions in section 3, if we're on track for them to be completed, obviously in time for the completion of the draft accounts?
Alan? Alan's there, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, convener, and good afternoon, everyone. The heritage assets review valuation, yep, that's due to start in a couple of weeks' time, and the work will be completed late May, early June, hopefully for the completion and inclusion in the unaudited accounts. And the estimation and judgment disclosure action is on the action plan and is being progressed by Matt Thompson and his team.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members? Okay, note the report. Then we'll go on to item number 3, internal audit annual strategy and plan for 23-24.
Thanks, Chair. So this report sets out the proposed annual internal audit plan for 23-24. Section 3.6, the covering report, sets out the current factors which have influenced the scope of the work. As you'll see, the plan includes a number of risk-based reviews, and there's also an allocation of time for the provision of audit advice and support to key achievement projects and initiatives that will be ongoing over the next 12 months. The plan also includes proactive corporate fraud reviews in areas such as client accounts, administration, employee expenses, catering stock checks, and education placing requests. And there's also an allocation of time in this year's plan in relation to the National Fraud Initiative to progress the 22-23 exercise. We've also built in a small contingency budget which can be used to undertake advisory work which may come up in the year but has not been included in this year's plan. Corporate management team has been consulted on the plan, and the report is recommending that members approve the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? Okay. Got a question? Councillor Maguire.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, actually, my question. Oh no, it is right. Sorry, thought I was on the wrong item there, and I was pretty sure we're on the right one. So I've got one comment and 2 questions. So first of all, it's good to see that succession planning is on our audit coverage for this year. My 2 questions, one was around supply management. So what is the scope of this? Is there any particular part of supply management that we'll be looking at, if you can say so? And my second question was just, what is impressed under HSCP?
Through your chair, so in relation to the interest, I'll take that question first. That's just in relation to petty cash that's held across all the HSCP establishments. So we'll do a risk-based approach in terms of looking at the higher value interest systems that are used to make sure that the funds are being held appropriately, or if there's other methods of disbursement of cash, we'll make recommendations for improvement. In relation to the scope for supplier management, the planning has been undertaken. We diverted it to the 23-24 audit plan because the supplier management guidance was being reviewed and updated. So it's more around service compliance with the supplier management guidelines, and this work will start after the summer recess and hopefully bring the audit report to the October meeting of the Audit Committee together with any recommendations for improvement. Hopefully that answers your queries there, Councillor Maguire. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really good. It's great to know that the petty cash is going to be looked at, and it's good to know that it's more about compliance rather than anything else. I was just wondering the scope. Thank you.
Yeah. Any others?
Yeah, just the one question. I noticed on page 46, the National Fraud Initiative percentage. These are excellent, and it's good that we're doing this matching and investigating them. Originally in agenda item number 2, we'd investigated 1,123. We found there was 29 fraud cases with a value of 28,508. How many staff work on the NFI within Inverclyde, please?
Through you, Chair, we have a decentralised process, so it's a very hard value to pull together. We've got 2 members within the internal audit team that carry out a number of investigations in relation to single person discount or housing benefit type claims, but the decentralised process, for example, blue badges, they will be investigated by the Centre for Independent Living. We have staff within HSCP that look at their matches because they're more aware of the reasons for those matches. Creditors as well, it's the accounts payable team that will investigate the creditors' matches. What internal audit will do is coordinate and monitor the overall exercise and provide training and support to relevant services, and where there's any issues arising, that maybe identify an issue with the control environment, we would then build that into the audit planning process to cover those audit areas in future years. Hopefully that gives you some assurance there.
It does give me assurance. Tell me, is it your department that coordinates all those other different departments?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kay, would you like to know?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just referring to page 45, the table in 5.2. I notice obviously there's risk scores against a number of audit areas, and we just to ask Andy, I'm presuming behind this is a sort of more detailed risk map, and is that something that could be shared for information with the committee? And also those reviews that don't have risk scores, it would be helpful just to get an understanding of the process by which sort of it's determined which reviews will be carried out each year when you're not using the sort of risk score approach.
Through you, Chair. So yes, we've got a database that sits behind the risk universe. So every area that's subject to audit is populated within the database, and the strategy sets out the inherent risk categories that we score each area against. So it's scored from 1 being little or no impact to 4 in terms of the highest impact. We also then look at if there's any other assurance work that's been undertaken, possibly by another regulator or external audit. We would also look at risk registers to see if there's anything highlighting risk in terms of the current control environment. We will also scan any reports that go to other committees. So that, in terms of the advisory reviews, we would see things going through committee that potentially internal audit, if we get in early as an advisory review, we may prevent problems going forward. So, for example, we're going to provide some advice to the education cashless catering replacement system, and it's just to ensure any audit requirements are built in at the start of the project, and also in relation to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund assurance arrangements. There's quite detailed assurance requirements from the UK government level, and it's all been coordinated through Glasgow City Council. So we want to make sure that the assurance arrangements that Inverclyde Council has in place meet those, those assurance arrangements. So we build in the advisory reviews of work where potentially we cause a risk in future years. In terms of the corporate frauds reviews, they're ones where we would regularly look at those areas because they're inherently risky, but I'm happy to look at those and maybe develop a different type of scoring in terms of those areas, if that would give you more assurance over the process, Councillor McCabe.
No, I mean, I think that's a helpful explanation of the process. I just think, I don't know how easy it would be to extract a report from the database in terms of the sort of the risk map. It would be useful if that was possible to see, I suppose, an overview of the high risks, because obviously we're seeing, when we look at this table, we're seeing lows at 8,680 down to 7,200. So I'm presuming there are quite a number under that might feature, I suppose, in next year or the year after, whatever. It'd just be useful just to get an overview of the different risk areas that are on the map.
No problem, happy to do that, Councillor McCabe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions from members? Okay, are we happy to approve the internal audit strategy plan?
Agreed.
Okay. To item number 5, which is the annual governance statement 21-22, and an update on improvement actions.
Thanks, Chair. So this report provides an update on the implementation progress in relation to the improvement actions which were identified as part of the annual governance statement for 21-22. There were 6 improvement actions due for completion by the 31st of March, 4 of which have been completed. The 2 remaining actions relate to embedding risk management and also in relation to business continuity planning, specifically around obtaining cybersecurity assurance from the suppliers. As an update, Chair, the Civil Contingency Service has confirmed that that piece of work is now complete. The 22-23 exercise for annual governance statement is now started, and it will continue to review the level of compliance with the Council Local Code of Governance and identify any further improvement actions that may be required for this year's annual governance statement. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? No. No questions? Okay. Happy to note the report.
Agreed.
Okay, now move on to agenda item number 6, the CIPFA Audit Committee Guidance 2022 update. And
Thanks, Chair. So this report sets out the results of the self-assessment exercise which was undertaken by Audit Committee members in relation to the recently published CIPFA Audit Committee Guidance. Some areas of improvement were identified and they're set out in the appendix together with proposed timescales for implementation. The report is asking Audit Committee to consider and approve the resulting action plan. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
any questions from members?
Thanks.
Mr.
Thanks, Chair. This sort of leads on from what Councillor McCabe was asking about in terms of, I was going to raise this under an earlier thing, but I thought this might be a more appropriate place to put it. How this committee acts as like a risk committee as well as an audit committee, because I'm sometimes a little bit unclear as to where the responsibility for the management of risk lies. And obviously there's work that the CMT will be doing to manage risk, but in terms of, as elected members, the active management of risk component, I'm not clear where that sits and whether, you know, this committee might be the place where, because it certainly says it in the standing orders that we should be using this committee to manage risk, whether there's a responsibility to receive more broad risk registers beyond what Councillor McCabe was talking about in terms of the audit, because there will be risks on the council that aren't anything to do with the internal audit function. I'm just wondering how we capture that and how we do that.
So I know, I'll share Andy's. Through yourself, Chair, there is the new committee plans are coming to the next cycle of committees. They all have the risk registers on them.
Right.
And so it's a new way of kind of reporting in relation to that. Then we're going to come back with the risk registers in relation to the committees every 6 months so that members are cited in the first ones that you'll see the red and the ambers. We may come back with exception reports in the future. In addition to that, we're going to, Andy's going to bring back a risk strategy, a refreshed one in June this year, and we'll bring it to audit committee so that we're very clear where all the reporting is going in relation to risk. But it's a very good point, Councillor McCluskey, and we just want to make sure that we clarify and people understand where the risk is sitting.
Great. That's just a quick follow-up. So then the responsibility for analysing the individual risk will sit with each of the service committees, and then presumably policy resources will have an overall view on everything. Is that how it will work? But in terms of this committee, just thinking about that new model, what will this committee receive with regards to risk?
Through yourself, Chair, P&R will be responsible for P&R, so it's not responsible for the whole council. So the audit committee will be the responsibility of the council, if you like. So each committee will have their own, and then actually the ones that are escalated that we think need to be cited will be cited through the audit committee.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from members? No. Okay, happy to note. Oh, Councillor McCabe.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the improvement plan, I know that the sort of lead responsibility for all of these actions rests with Mr. Stradley, myself, title. But I'm presuming that the chair, the vice chair, and members of the committee will be actively involved, I suppose, in these processes to ensure we're satisfied with what he comes up with.
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair. So, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it will obviously vary from action to action, Councillor McKay, but certainly we'd be looking to involve the committee members, particularly, when we're talking about training. Obviously, we're saying an annual report would come from the committee as well. So, yeah, we'll work the detail off that if that assists.
Okay, thank you. I have every confidence in you, Mr. Strachan. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Great.
Any further questions from members? Yeah, happy to note the report.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, before we finish, I'd like to thank Michael Volke. Oh, sorry. Oh, God. Where are they? Sorry. Yes. So we have, sorry, the National Fraud Initiative Exercise 22-23 update.
Thanks, Chair. So this report advises members of the matches that were received in relation to the National Fraud Initiative Exercise for 22-23. I've set out a table at Appendix 1, a summary of the matches received which will be investigated by either internal audit or the relevant services. Internal audit will provide ongoing coordination and monitoring of the exercise and will provide regular updates to Audit Committee as part of the regular progress reports. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? Yes.
Thank you. Just on the table at the back there, Appendix 1, obviously it identifies the value of fraud and error at £3,000. That's quite low, depending on was a lot of effort went into actually identifying that. So I'm just wondering, is that out of the ordinary, or do we expect to be able to get more money, identify more money? It's quite low. And this is comes with the risk of auditing, isn't it? Looking at the FDB and discovering nothing, and then having a brush here. So looking at that, there we looked at 214 things. We've got £3,000. Identifies just like a commentary on that.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the Cabinet Office run this exercise and they have an external provider of the software system and they're constantly updating the algorithms. We get what we call a lot of positive matches, for example, housing benefit claimants with another data set, but there's a de minimis level of housing benefit, and if you have an earning, say for example you're on payroll but you're also getting housing benefits, if you earn under the de minimis level, it's entirely fine for you to have housing benefit as well. But the way the system works, it just sees that there's a person receiving housing benefit that's also on payroll. So we've got to investigate those matches, unfortunately. Likewise with creditors, we have a lot of creditors where we have a regular payment to contractors of a similar amount every month. The system isn't clever enough to know that that's part of a 12-month payment plan. So again, we've got to investigate a number of those matches. It is difficult to sift all that information and quite labour intensive, but we do still get some key areas where there's been error identified or potential fraud. So we certainly would continue with the exercise, but yes, it frustrates us as well.
Just wondering, is that something I take it we're feeding back to about improving algorithms? If we don't want to be spending resources, we don't have to be spending.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So we have a regular meeting with Audit Scotland every time the matches are released, and also at the end of every exercise. This is the 9th biennial exercise that we've undertaken, and it has improved the algorithm. We've now moved to what we would call a risk-based approach. So we would get high fraud risk, medium fraud risk, or low fraud risk. Unfortunately, the high risk ones are where there's more information about an individual who's matching and lots of data sets, whereas the lower risk, those are the ones that potentially we should be looking at, which is why in Inverclyde we tend to review all matches, but we will build it into the normal audit planning process. So when we first implemented this, when it came into internal audit in 2016, we carried out audits of blue badges, we carried out audits of creditors to look at the control processes to see if it could be improved to prevent some of these matches coming up. But yeah, to answer your initial question, apologies, Councillor, we do feedback to Audit Scotland to coordinate it for Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Andy. Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Andy if there's sort of any trends in the number of matches. So we've got 1,589 for 22-23. How's that compare with previous years? Are we seeing any trends? Are they reducing? Are they staying the same? As the sort of the level of matches increasing?
Through you, Chair, so for this year the level of matches has decreased, and I think it is as a result of them improving the algorithm. But you'll see from an earlier report, the recheck report has actually increased quite significantly. So where we're reducing in one report, and it could be down to better controls in place, regular reviews of data. For example, the blue badge information system, the reason matches come up is that it matches against the PWP deceased records, and sometimes it's just a timing issue. We haven't updated our blue badge information system in a timeliest manner, and therefore it appears as a match. So we're having regular reviews and updates of the deceased cases. The Tell Us Once process is helping to reduce the number of matches that we get year on year. But yes, certainly from last year's there's been a significant decrease, and I think it is down to the improvement of the algorithm that runs behind the whole exercise, Councillor McCabe. So hopefully that answers your query there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Yes,
Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Convener. Andy, again, on page 62 of that chart, I don't think that value of fraud of 3,097 does you enough credit. But I go back to page 12, agenda item number 2, there is a value of 28,000 odd, and again there it's council tax single person. Would you not put that council tax single person into this chart here on page 62, which would make it look probably more realistic?
Thanks, Sharon. I take your point, Councillor Wilson. The recheck exercise is separate to the overall National Fraud Initiative. We actually pay for that exercise on an annual basis. It costs us about £600, and to pay £600 to get that level of return. So it's the 2-yearly exercise. It's a snapshot in time. It's Octoberish, the time frame that we take the data. What we do with the recheck is we refresh it round about between March, April and May. Certainly when there's an election, we would refresh it at that point to look at the most up-to-date electoral roll. And that does, as you can see from the results, does give us a higher return in terms of fraud or error. But we continue to do that off our own merit. It's not something that comes through the National Fraud Initiative, the main exercise. We just feel it's a valuable use of our resources to get that return.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, any further questions? Okay, happy to note the report.
Happy.
Yep. Okay. Move on to agenda item number 8, which is the indicative external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 2023. Al.
Thank you, Convener. If I can just briefly introduce this indicative external audit plan before passing over to Michael Wilkie, who is the Director overseeing the audit of Inverclyde Council's accounts on behalf of KPMG. This is a normal report that you will get up each year, and you'll notice this is an indicative one. It's the first year of KPMG's appointment, and the final plan is scheduled to come to the 29th of June. Audit Committee at the same time as the unaudited accounts, but I'll simply pass over to Michael, who will take you through the report and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So I'll just introduce myself briefly. Michael Wilkie. I'm an audit director with KPMG, and we've been appointed by Audit Scotland for a 5-year period starting with the year ending 31st of March. Just as brief background, I've been with KPMG for going on 18 years. always working within a public sector practice, and most recently the Audit Director responsible for our audits of Perth and Kinross and Aberdeen City Council as part of our previous appointment round. Today is just an indicative audit plan, so I won't go through every page, but rather just give you a sense of some of the key aspects that I expect to cover through our annual audit this year. And as pointed out, we'll bring an update to the June meeting. Within our report, then, we set out on our report, page 4 or 68 of your pack, I believe, our expected approach to materiality. That's important because it drives the level of testing throughout our audit, the size of our samples and the approach that we take. I am expecting to set that at around 2% of council expenditure and group expenditure, so that's in the region of 7.5 million. We do design our procedures based on a lower threshold of around 5.5 million to allow for any aggregation risk. And in our annual report to the committee, we will highlight any errors which we identify, whether or not they're adjusted by management, where those are individually or in aggregate over £250,000. That said, there may be adjustments which we highlight to you because of their nature, might be below that amount, so changes in disclosure, or if it was something that we considered was material by its nature, for example, around senior remuneration. Within the body of the document, we highlight on the next page what we expect to be some of the significant audit risks. And by defining something as a significant audit risk, it again drives the level of testing that we undertake. The first two areas within the plan, which I would highlight, are both included because of the level of judgment and subjectivity, which are inherent in the numbers which ultimately are presented in the financial statements. So the first is the valuation of land and buildings. And in that respect, we would plan to utilise a KPMG specialist valuer to support our ability to challenge management's assumptions, as well as testing as an audit team the information to which those assumptions are applied. So as an example, an assumption may be made about the cost per square foot to construct a replacement building. We will use our valuer to support the judgment around that cost per square foot in the current market, and the audit team will equally test the square footage to which it is being applied in order to drive the number in the accounts. The second and similar area is the valuation of retirement benefit obligations, by which we mean the gross pension liability in the accounts. That is highly subjective based on assumptions which are elected by management and applied in the accounts. And again, we use KPMG actuarial specialists to benchmark and support our ability to challenge those assumptions, and as an audit team to test the controls over the information which is provided by the council to the scheme actuary, and again is used to multiply against the assumptions and drive the number in the accounts. There are two other presumed fraud risks. I say presumed because audit standards suggest that they exist in any audit, and I would expect to largely rebut one of those, which is the risk in respect of management's ability to manipulate when income is recognised. That's because by the nature of the council, there's limited judgment over income recognition, and it tends to be received for a very specific and given year rather than multi-years. And equally, I would expect to rebut it in respect of certain streams of expenditure, for example, in respect of some grant expenditure. I do accept the second presumed fraud risk, which is in respect of management's ability to override control, and we focus our testing in that regard specifically around journals. The only other part I will refer to within our plan is our page 12 onwards, which summarises our responsibilities and planned approach in respect of the wider scope of public audit. So that's where we go beyond the numbers. And in our first year, I would expect the focus to be on follow-up of previous external audit recommendations, review of your previous best value review and actions arising from that, as well as starting to think about financial sustainability and management, overall vision and leadership within the council, governance, and the use of resources and performance management information. I'll just stop there. I think that's a good introduction to our audit strategy and approach, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Michael. Is there any questions from members? Councillor McCabe?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Michael, for that introduction. Just a couple of questions from me. The first is in terms of, obviously, it's a new appointment, What have you been doing since you were appointed when you've been, I suppose, to get to know the council and to get to know our people? And secondly, in terms of the completion of the audit, are you confident that you have the necessary resources to achieve the finalisation of the accounts and sign off before the end of September?
Yep, in respect of your first question, we've been meeting with Alan and his team and have regular catch-ups which are ongoing. We've begun our audit planning, which includes, for example, requesting various pieces of information from the council, review of minutes and policies which are available on the website, review of the prior auditors' files and reports, and that all helps us to begin to understand the council and plan our audit work. And in respect of your second question, yes, I'm confident that we have the resources and plan in place to deliver to the statutory timetable.
Okay, just to follow that up, if I may, did you have a handover meeting with the previous external auditors? And secondly, is there any intention to have direct engagement with elected members?
We've had a handover discussion and we will arrange to review aspects of their work as part of our procedures. And yes, I would expect to have direct contact with senior elected members as we go through our planning and risk assessment and finalisation of the audit process. As a mandatory part of our audit procedures, we have to make inquiries of those charged with governance. So that would include, for example, Chair of Audit Committee.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay, Councillor Maguire.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions. Some of it's just clarification of some of the terms, and please forgive me if some other people have these questions. So the first one is, can you explain what you mean by group expenditure versus council expenditure? Are you including alios in that, for example? And what's meant by journals in this context? And then once I've had these questions answered, I'll ask the other two.
Yeah, so by council we mean the council entity only, and the group includes those entities which are its subsidiaries or investments in joint ventures. So main example being the Integration Joint Board, which is included in the council group. Okay,
that makes sense. And what's meant by journals?
Journals are the method used by officers to basically record financial transactions within the ledger which drives the accounts. So they're the mechanism by which the numbers are changed in effect.
Perfect, thank you. And then my final two questions is, how were the areas to audit selected by yourselves, if you're able to tell us that? And secondly, just for the independent statement, I'm aware that KPMG is a huge organisation and that yourselves engage with things from shares all the way through to land valuations. So within that doesn't have any mention of that. Does that mean that there's no perception that the wider business of KPMG will have an influence upon the impartiality of what's happened?
So the second part of your question, first of all, we have various internal processes and systems to record all of our interactions with entities, and that includes business relationships as well as day-to-day operational relationships. So for example, if we're renting premises, that's recorded, and we use those systems at the outset of any audit appointment to determine whether or not we are independent and on an ongoing basis. So we've completed that process before accepting appointment as auditor to ensure that we are independent and impartial, and we're making those assessments. And sorry, I've forgotten the first part of your question.
Sorry, the first part of my question was just around how were the areas to audit selected. I really enjoyed you going through and explaining the significance of the risk. I'm sorry for all my questions. First time we've had the auditors come on since I've been elected, I believe. So I just asked the question. Sorry.
That's fine. So we've got 4 areas broadly outlined, and it is just a draft at the moment as we continue our audit planning. But in essence, 2 of those areas are presumed to exist in any audit. Those are the two aspects where there's a potential for fraud. And the other 2 areas we have selected by considering the level of materiality. So that's where I've said it's around 7.5 million. And comparing that to the numbers which were in with the council's financial statements, and considering the other information that we've gained based on our initial discussions and planning process to think about where is the greatest opportunity for either fraud or error in those financial statements. And the 2 areas that I outlined around pensions and valuation of landing buildings are both therefore identified because of the size of the numbers in the accounts compared to our materiality. So there are many hundreds of millions of pounds, and also the degree of subjectivity that arises in both of those cases. So unlike something like council tax, which is fixed and known and based on the number of bills issued, the number that is in the accounts in respect of land and buildings is judgmental and changes year on year based on the external environment, and therefore is much more subjective and likely to move, and easier therefore to get wrong.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for having so many questions. Thank you, Chair, for indulging me, and thank you, Mike, for answering them. I'm looking forward to working with these over the coming years. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions from members on this? No. Okay. We're happy to note this report then?
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael, for attending our meeting and answering all these questions.
Thank you. No problem.
Thank you.
Go now.
That's it, man.